Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. We are honored today to have Maryland State Representative Jill P. Carter. Jill P. Carter is currently state senator in Maryland, and she is running for the District 7, where the Honorable Elijah Cummings, we know that he just passed away, and she is opting to run for that district. Welcome aboard, Senator Jill P. Carter. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I understand that, first of all, I understand we have something in common. We were actually both delegates for Sanders in Philly
Yeah, Bernie Sanders, last election, absolutely.
in 2016. Anyhow, let's get busy about talking a little bit first about yourself. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll talk about why it is that you want to run for the district. And if you could turn the speakers down a little bit so that we don't have the feedback. Okay, go ahead.
So, for the last year, I've been a state senator in Maryland, and prior to that, I served multiple terms in the Maryland House of Delegates. And in 26, that was from 2003 to 2016. And then in 2016, I resigned to become director of civil rights for Baltimore City. Lo and behold, and I really thought that I was finished with elected politics at the time because it had been, I'd say, sort of a rough ride. Because I came as a civil rights a child of civil rights, a criminal defense attorney, very much a justice advocate, and I found that in Maryland politics, even though we're Democrat led, and even though we're labeled a progressive state, we were very, very too slow moving on a lot of important justice issues. So I stepped down to become director of civil rights for Baltimore City, a job that I loved. And an opening came up in the Senate, and advocates and others convinced me to run for the Senate. With much trepidation, I did because politics can be when you're pushing up against brick walls, it can be a little painful. So I was hesitant, and then I got into the Senate, and as fate would have it, I had a wonderful year. I found the first year in the Senate to be much better than the House of Delegates. I found that because of the timing, a lot of the issues that I had been championing in the House of Delegates were now had ripened, and so it wasn't quite as impossible to get certain things done. Things to do with the decriminalization of poverty, allowing for greater expungement expansion in the criminal justice system, multiple other things. And so I've enjoyed the year in the Senate.
Now, I mean, I love what you said with respect to, in as much as you are in the Northeast, in as much as, well, I mean, Maryland is sort of a border state, but in as much as you're in the Northeast, many people think that, well, progressiveness is perfect, and you guys are a blue state and everything is going just fine. Explain to me, what do you see needed from a progressive standpoint to really make the imaginary feelings we have about out there to be real?
So, and first, I want to say that our state is finally changing. We recently got a new Senate president, happens to be a person that comes kind of from the progressive section of faction of the Democratic Party. He's 36 years old. He's from Baltimore City, and that means that he's replacing the longest serving Senate president, both in the country and in the state of Maryland.
Really?
So I do see change afoot. I think that, in Maryland in particularly, the biggest impediment to progress has been racism, lack of desire on the part of the party and the leadership to address racial disparities. We have an article recently came out that we have the most incarcerated population in the country.
Really?
Those are things that have to be addressed. And so I do think the time is now to do that in the Maryland Senate. I do. And then also, we're about to embark upon the greatest education reform effort, in the history of the state. And so some things are going better than they did for a long time. I do think that Maryland was very much like very much into mass incarceration, over incarceration, a lot of unfair systems, like the system, for example, of child support, where dead broke parents that aren't custodial parents were expected to pay enormous amounts of money that they never could afford. And even if they were incarcerated, for example, you get out of incarceration, get employed, you're hit with this mandatory payment for arrearages, and it takes most of your check, and you can never get ahead. That's the kind of thing that I think we're moving away from, in terms of understanding that there's some people that are so impoverished that regular systems that have been in place simply don't work for them.
Draconian type policies. Um, you are you came from what I call the real progressive activist stock. Um, I think people would want to know you. There's some big shoes that you're hoping to fill up right now. People want to know that you really have it within you to do that. What's your chops? I mean, your dad came from your dad did quite a bit. So tell me a little bit about him and what he's instilled in you and you moving it forward.
So my dad was a big civil rights leader. Some say icon. He was pretty much an independent, even though there was a time that he was the president of CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. He left there, and news articles tell me, because he died when I was 7.
Yes.
So I read news articles, and kind of like me and the House of Delegates, the General Assembly, CORE just wasn't moving fast enough for him. And so he started something, an organization called Activist Inc., and they were mainly activists for fair housing. They challenged and protested uh, blockbusting predatory practices in Baltimore, and had a modicum of success. But I think the thing about my dad was that he gave his full life, his whole self, uh, to the freedom struggle. And when he died, I was devastated, of course, but I felt that there's no one else on the planet here to pick that up except for me. And so I really did live my entire life feeling like I've got to find a way to bring equality and justice, really to my city, Baltimore, which doesn't have it to this day. And I never really thought I would be into politics, but I was, kind of guided to run. And to be honest with you, as a lifelong Democrat, it comes from a family that believed, that the super voter family, that, my mom came and picked me up from my college dorm the first time I was 18 to vote, to make sure I didn't forget to vote. We believed very strongly as a family in Democrats. I campaigned for Democrats since I was a little kid, and I believed in the party. And then I was shocked that I got to be elected, and not only was the party not receptive to a lot of things that were justice oriented and the right thing to do, but they actually were very resistant and mean spirited, really, about anybody that bucked the system or sought to bring better change. And so I'll just tell you, my career was, I got elected in 2003. I really felt like, this is going to be wonderful. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to be a lawmaker, blah, blah. Shortly after I was elected, I got the information about the number of illegal arrests in Baltimore City, and that was frankly under Mayor Martin O'Malley at the time. And from the years of 1999 to 2006, in Baltimore City, there were 750 arrests, average of over 100,000 a year for that period of time. And what data showed is that between 30% to 50% of all of the arrests were either illegal, meaning lacking probable cause, or they were for things so minor that people should have never really been arrested for them. Things like urinating in public or trespass or very small things. This is something that I discovered, I fought against. I assumed that when the data revealed what was going on, the Democratic Party, the elected officials, Martin O'Malley would all say, oh, this is awful. This is a human rights violation. We have to change this. Nothing could have been further from the truth. It just persisted. And so what happened is, because of that, I became very marginalized by the party. I bring that up because you talked about the chops. So that started my career, and my career kind of continued along that vein on so many various issues, from the forced submission of DNA for upon arrest to implementing slots and gambling, but not creating fair opportunities for regular people. So many different issues that I always found myself kind of at odds with leadership. And I stayed, I fought, I never gave in on these issues. And it was not a pleasant experience for me. But I did it because I felt like, well, if I leave, I'm not sure that somebody else is going to fill the spot. And even though I may not win these issues, I think it's important to raise them. What we need in Congress is a person that's going to fight with that same spirit of advocacy for doing what's right, regardless of how difficult it is, regardless of the level of resistance from the powerful forces. And I don't believe there's anyone else in the race that has that track record or that fortitude. And so I've been born and raised in the 7th District, and I want a fighter for the people. I want a champion as my congressman, congresswoman, and I hope that the mass number of voters of the district want the same thing. I also was a little kid when the first Black congressman in the 7th District, Perrin J. Mitchell, was elected, and I vividly remember campaigning for Perrin J. Mitchell. And the belief was that if we got Perrin J. Mitchell in the Congress, that we would have complete representation, justice for all, and it gave people a lot of hope. And he did not let us down. He, as you may know, as a congressperson in the early 70s, created a budget amendment that required 10% set asides across the country for minority businesses. So he made a difference that the world, is still benefited from. And that's the kind of champion that we need. And so Elijah Cummings has gotten in the latter part of his career, a lot of credit. He was a great speaker. He was a great champion for what was right. And he wasn't afraid to stand up to powerful forces, such as President Trump. And so that's what I'm bringing. I'm the only sitting senator. I'm the only criminal defense attorney, or I think even the only attorney in the race. And frankly, the only one that's been battle tested to withstand serious challenges and opposition from those in power.
Now, Senator, let me tell you one thing that I found exciting. One of the reasons when I was contacted, I said I really wanted to talk to you because I think it is time now for us not to keep electing the status quo, not to keep electing those with those big name IDs that people consider the bastion of the Democratic Party, because the bastion of the Democratic Party, for all practical purpose, has failed those people who have supported them. So the expectation is with warriors going into the Congress right now, that is exactly what we must have. And I'd like to know on policy. We know that you're definitely going to go out there and work for social justice and criminal justice to ensure that it's handled or effected equitably. My question now is, but your task is much larger. Your task is no longer just Baltimore. As you know, Elijah Cummings had quite a bit of power in the House. On healthcare, what do you intend to do? How do you intend to help push Congress to what I call the moral vision of what healthcare is supposed to look like?
So I'm a longtime supporter of Medicare for all. Even before Democrats embraced it, I had friends that were very progressive and from the medical field that had explained to me about a decade ago that Medicare for all was the best possible policy. Clearly, healthcare is a human right, and our current system favors business and insurance over people and even medical health professionals. And so I am going to be, and I've committed to being, a day one sponsor of Medicare for all, specifically House Bill 1184 that's being championed right now by Congresswoman Jayapal. But I think that, there's a difference between people, and we have some now and I'm sure in the current 120 House sponsors, it's one thing to just put your name on a bill and then sit back and say, oh, I'm for it, so that, your constituency or others or advocates can't complain that you're not supporting it. But it's a whole other thing to champion it, to educate people, to fight, to relentlessly fight and use your leverage to try to get it passed.
That what you
That's
just I was you kind of preempted my next question, because what I wanted to say is right now we have the Partnership for Healthcare America that is attempting to destroy Medicare for All by misinforming people, by lying to people. It takes courage for a congressperson who is going to be lobbied to by the health industrial complex to say, to hell with you guys, America, I have a voice, and this is what they're trying to do to you. Are you going to be one of those Congress people who don't toe the line, but when these clowns come into office and say and mislead Americans, you get on TV, you get on whatever networks possible, independent and otherwise, to explain the scam?
exactly. So the people need champions, in every legislative body, whether it be the Congress or even the state legislators. Too often, all of the special interests have too much power and control for the legislators. And a part of that is because the horrible campaign financing laws. We need complete campaign finance reform. It's actually ridiculous that regular people can't hope to get elected by being great candidates and trying to reach voters when they're up against so much money. And so often it's the people versus the money, and people that get elected are beholden to what I call their owners, donors, and controllers, and they are completely
I love
disconnected
that.
from the needs of the people.
I love that. Owners, donors, and controllers that have just been added to my moniker as a new moniker. I love that one. But that is so true. Now, so and on policies like we have allowed, when I say we, progressives have, rather, the Democratic Party, not progressives, the Democratic Party have allowed many of the progressive policies to be caricatured, uncontrolled, caricatured without any real pushback. Will you be one of those senators who speak up against that and speak up against those who allow this caricature?
So absolutely, and that's what my entire. So one thing I want to say, I feel prepared for this because of the record that I have in the House of Delegates. Um, Very prepared because of the opposition that I often had to face from the leadership of the party, from even sometimes some of the Democrat caucuses, the Black caucuses, all of that. I've never abandoned principle, or I've always been very cognizant that the people need a voice here, and win or lose, somebody has to stand up for the people that are not here. People talk about the voiceless. It's not that they're voiceless; it's their voices are intentionally silenced in these halls of injustice a lot of times. And so, absolutely, being a champion is the most important thing to me. Frankly, more than any policy issue, platform issue, it's about character and integrity and fighting for people who need it. Uh, People need the champions. Uh, Again, we too much deference is given to big business, corporations, special interest, and of course, in healthcare, the insurance companies run everything.
Absolutely. So now you have a very full, so it's actually a full list of candidates that are running for that positions. Now, is it a jungle primary, or do you the top two go into a runoff? How does it work in Maryland?
Nope. So there's a special election on February 4th is the primary, and there are 32 candidates. I think seven Republicans, the rest Democrats. A lot of Democrats running. Now, what's interesting is that there's also a special general on April 28th at the same time and on the same day as the regular primary for the seat. So
Wow.
February 4th and April 28th for the special, that only takes whoever wins through the end of the year. We have to also win the regular primary on April 28th to be able to serve the entire term. So it's a lot, and yeah, it's a whole lot. But so I don't believe that there's anybody else. First of all, of the top tier candidates, so to speak, I'm the only one that's actually been elected by the people. Now, granted, my district 41 is only about one third of the 7th congressional district, but there's a former congressperson in the race. He hasn't been elected in 25 years, and there's the wife of the former congressman who is in the race, but She's not a native of here, and she's never been elected by the people. And so one of the reasons I'm even running is because I don't feel comfortable with any of the other candidates that I want that person to represent this very important district, this very historic district in terms of what it has meant for our communities. We can't afford to entrust it to someone who is not invested in our people and who is not interested in championing our needs. And so there is nobody else in the race that has proven that they will do that.
Now, in closing, what message would you like to look in the camera and tell the folks of District 7, Maryland's District 7?
February 4th and April 28th, I really need your support. I don't look at it as, a race that I'm in. I call it the people's race, the people's campaign. And again, it's people versus money. Even though I'm currently elected, I have never been one that has received big donations. So my donations have to come from the people because that's the only way that we're going to win. I'm not going to get the big PAC money or the big corporate money, most likely. And I think it's important that people have to finance their candidates if their candidates are going to actually represent them. And so I am asking for the vote, but I'm also asking for the financial support, which is critically important to be able to reach all of the voters.
And how can they get in touch with you, Senator Carter?
JillCarterForCongress.com is the website. Facebook, Jill P. Carter for Congress. Twitter, Jill P. Carter. And I think those are the primary ways to get in touch.
Maryland State Senator Jill P. Carter, hoping to fill the big shoes of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I think Maryland has a great choice to make. Thank you so kindly. And any final words?
Thank you for this podcast. Thank you for educating the people. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful day.
You too.